won't save you. We're opening the doors to a world where darkness doesn't just blind, it consumes the soul. Here, in the darkest corners of the night, even your breath can become a harbinger of nightmares. Question everything you knew about safety and comfort. Are you prepared to hear eerie whispers from nowhere invade your mind and torment every thought? Leave your fears at the door, because what we show you will make them burst forth. Are you ready to journey into the dark corners where every sound and shadow harbors an unknown danger? Sit tight and brace yourself, for the night is just beginning, and its horror could become your eternal companion. It's time to step into a world with no way back, where darkness will be your only guide.
In a quaint suburban neighborhood, filled with the scent of fresh grass and the sound of children playing, a group of friends navigated the twists and turns of their ordinary lives. There was Max, the optimistic dreamer, whose laughter could light up the gloomiest day. His best friend Sarah was the practical one, often grounding Max's wild ideas with her level-headedness. Then there was Jake, the tech-savvy nerd who could fix anything with a circuit board, and finally, Emily, the aspiring artist whose vivid imagination often led them on whimsical adventures. On a particularly overcast Saturday, the friends decided to explore a local thrift store that had just opened its doors. The store, a treasure trove of forgotten relics, was filled with the scent of aged wood and dust. As they wandered through the narrow aisles, they joked and reminisced about their childhood finds, their laughter echoing off the cluttered walls. Max picked up an old lamp, pretending to be a game show host as he demonstrated its dubious functionality. Sarah rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile, while Jake snapped pictures for his social media feed. As they ventured deeper into the store, Emily's eye caught something unusual in a corner. Beneath a stack of vintage records, she spotted a dusty, faded box labeled Home Videos. Intrigued, she pulled it out, revealing several old VHS tapes. One tape stood out. It was labeled simply Fear Tape in haphazard handwriting. The title sent a shiver down her spine, and she instinctively glanced back at her friends, who were now hovering around her curiously.
"What do you think it is?"
Jake asked, adjusting his glasses as he leaned in for a closer look. Max shrugged, a mischievous grin spreading across his face.
"Maybe it's a horror movie. We should totally watch it."
Sarah, however, felt a twinge of unease.
"It looks old, and the name is kind of creepy. Are you sure we should?"
Despite her reservations, her friend's excitement was infectious. The group decided to purchase the tape, their curiosity outweighing the slight chill that had settled in the air. As they made their way back to Max's house, the ominous title echoed in Emily's mind. The idea of a horror film was enticing, yet something about the tape felt off, as if it were a harbinger of something unsettling. Once settled in the comfort of Max's living room, they prepared for their movie night. The dim light of the room flickered as they set up the old VCR, a relic that Max had salvaged from his parents' attic. With a final glance at each other, they pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy footage of a house, seemingly abandoned and shrouded in shadows. It was then that a chill swept through the room, and the friends exchanged wary glances, the air thick with anticipation, and an unspoken understanding that this night would be anything but ordinary. As the tape rolled, the friends leaned forward, their eyes glued to the screen. The footage showed the exterior of an old house, its windows dark and foreboding, whispers of wind rustling the nearby trees. It was unsettling, yet captivating. Max, with his usual bravado, broke the silence.
"This is just classic horror stuff. I love it."
His enthusiasm was met with hesitant chuckles from the others, each of them feeling the weight of an unexplainable tension in the air. The first few scenes depicted the house in its eerie state, empty rooms, peeling wallpaper, and furniture draped in dust. But then, as the camera panned to a narrow staircase leading to the basement, something caught Jake's eye. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, pointing to a fleeting shadow that seemed to dart across the frame. The group fell silent, eyes wide, as they rewound the tape and played the segment again. This time, the shadow was unmistakable, a dark figure slipping just out of sight. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, a knot forming in her stomach.
Okay, that was weird. Can we just watch it without pausing?
She requested, trying to regain her composure. Emily, however, was entranced.
No, I want to see more.
She insisted, her artistic mind racing with possibilities. As they continued watching, the scenes grew increasingly disturbing. They saw glimpses of violent confrontations and heard muffled cries, which sent chills down their spines. But what truly unsettled them were the anomalies interspersed throughout the footage. Faces seemed to materialize in the background, flickering in and out of focus, and distant whispers echoed in the silence. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their earlier excitement fading into a sense of dread. Max, attempting to lighten the mood, joked,
"Maybe we just summoned a ghost. Should we be taking notes?"
His humor fell flat as Sarah shot him an annoyed look. Just as the tape reached a particularly harrowing scene, a figure violently lurching towards the camera, followed by a series of agonizing screams, the screen flickered. The image froze, then distorted into a kaleidoscope of colors, leaving them in breathless suspense.
"What the?"
Jake started, but before he could finish, darkness enveloped the room. The lights went out, plunging them into an oppressive blackness. The sudden silence was deafening, only broken by the faint sound of Emily gasping.
"Did the power just go out?"
She whispered, her voice trembling. Max fumbled for his phone, illuminating the room with its glow. As he scanned the faces of his friends, they were all wearing expressions of shock and fear. Then a loud crash echoed from the direction of the kitchen, followed by a whisper that seemed to drift through the darkness.
"Get out."
The chilling words hung in the air, freezing them in place as a palpable sense of terror washed over the group. They were no longer mere spectators. They had unwittingly invited the horror into their lives. In the days that followed their fateful viewing of the fear tape, the atmosphere among the friends shifted drastically. What had begun as innocent curiosity slowly morphed into a living nightmare. Each morning felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of unseen eyes pressed down upon them. Their once joyful interactions became laced with tension and unspoken dread. Max was the first to experience a chilling incident. One evening, while sitting alone in his room, he heard a faint rustling sound coming from his closet. He dismissed it at first, attributing it to the wind. But as the noise grew louder, he felt an unsettling shiver crawl up his spine. Gathering his courage, he opened the closet door, only to find it empty. Just as he was about to turn away, a cold gust of wind swept past him, making the hair on his arms stand on end. The sensation lingered, as if something unseen had brushed against him. From that day forward, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself plagued by insomnia. Each night, she lay in bed, staring at the shadows that danced on her walls. One night, she awoke to the sound of her bedroom door creaking open. Heart pounding, she squinted into the darkness, only to see a fleeting figure dart past the edge of her vision. In a panic, she switched on her bedside lamp, illuminating the room, but the figure had vanished. The following days were spent in a fog of exhaustion, her once vibrant personality dulled by an ever-growing paranoia. Jake, ever the skeptic, tried to rationalize their experiences, but even he couldn't ignore the strange occurrences. While working on his computer late one night, he felt a sudden chill sweep through the room. The lights flickered, and all his devices powered down simultaneously. When he stood to investigate, he noticed that his reflection in the darkened screen seemed to linger for a moment too long, an eerie smile stretching across his face that was not his own. He quickly turned away, the unease swelling within him. Emily, too, was not spared from the escalating horrors. One evening, while sketching in her dimly lit studio, she felt a sharp draft, causing her papers to flutter wildly. As she reached to steady them, she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye, a shadowy figure standing just beyond the threshold of her door. When she turned, there was nothing there, but the air was thick with a foreboding presence. Each stroke of her pencil became a desperate attempt to capture what she could not understand, her art transforming into grotesque depictions of fear and despair. As the days dragged on, their once close friendships began to fray under the strain of their mutual terror. Conversations were punctuated by nervous laughter, but the underlying tension was palpable. They began to avoid discussing the tape, but the silence only fueled their anxiety. Every creak of the floorboards or whisper of the wind seemed to taunt them, reminding them of the horrors they had unwittingly unleashed. Their once vibrant lives were now shrouded in an oppressive darkness that seeped into every corner. With each passing day, the shadows grew longer, and their fears deepened. The fabric of their reality began to unravel, entwining them in a web of dread that pulled them closer to the brink of madness. The haunting tale of the fear tape was no longer just a story, it was their new reality, and there was no escaping the horrors that awaited them. Driven by an insatiable need to understand the horrors depicted in the tape, the friends embarked on an investigation into its origins. They gathered in Max's living room, a makeshift command center, determined to glean any information they could about the mysterious film and the house featured within it. The atmosphere was tense, filled with uncertainty and a lingering sense of dread. Jake, utilizing his tech skills, scoured the internet for any references to the house or the events depicted in the tape. After hours of searching, he stumbled upon a chilling article detailing a series of horrific murders that had taken place in a house matching the one from the tape. The article described the gruesome details the family that once lived there had been brutally slain under mysterious circumstances, and the case had remained unsolved for decades. As Jake read aloud, the room fell silent, each friend absorbing the gravity of the discovery.
Look at this.
Jake exclaimed, pointing to an old photograph of the house, its facade eerily similar to the one they had seen on the tape.
This is it. The same house.
Max's initial excitement faded as he processed the implications. What if we were not just dealing with a movie? What if there is something more, something supernatural? Their investigation led them to the local library, where they combed through archives and newspapers, hoping to uncover more about the house's dark past. They learned that the previous occupants had experienced strange phenomena, objects moving on their own, whispers in the night, and even reports of apparitions. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the atmosphere thickening with fear. Determined to confront their fears, they decided to visit the actual house featured in the tape. The journey to the remote location was fraught with trepidation, the weight of their findings heavy on their minds. Upon arrival, they stood before the decaying structure, its once vibrant exterior now a mere shadow of its former self. The air was thick with an unshakable tension, and the distant sound of rustling leaves seemed to whisper warnings. As they stepped inside, the floorboards creaked ominously beneath their feet. The interior was just as they had seen in the tape dust-covered furniture, peeling wallpaper, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Emily took out her sketchbook, wanting to capture the eerie beauty of the place, but her hands trembled as she began to draw. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the house itself were alive, watching them with eyes unseen. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the upper floors, sending them into a panic.
Did you hear that?
Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of their hearts. They exchanged worried glances before taking cautious steps toward the staircase. With each creak of the stairs, they felt the weight of history pressing down upon them. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, distorting the already haunting space. As they reached the second floor, a chill swept through the hallway. The air turned electric, and a disembodied voice whispered,
"Get out!"
The friends froze, their breath hitching in their throats. The voice was unmistakable, the same words they had heard during their initial viewing of the tape. The realization that they were not alone gripped them with terror. In a moment of sheer panic, they turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The walls seemed to close in, and they could feel the oppressive presence surrounding them. Emily, still clutching her sketchbook, pressed her back against the wall, her artistic instincts battling with her fear.
"We need to get out of here,"
she cried, desperation lacing her voice. As they frantically searched for a way out, they caught glimpses of shadowy figures flitting through the corners of their vision. Each movement sent jolts of fear coursing through them, pushing them further into a state of panic. Just as they thought all hope was lost, Jake spotted an open window at the end of the hallway.
"This way,"
he shouted, leading the charge toward freedom. With a collective effort, they pushed their way through the window, tumbling into the overgrown yard outside. Gasping for breath, they looked back at the house, its dark windows seeming to watch them intently. They had unraveled the mystery, but at what cost? The horrors of the fear tape were no longer confined to the screen. They had become entwined in their reality, leaving them haunted by the chilling presence of the house and the secrets it held. As the days wore on after their harrowing visit to the house, the ghosts from the fear tape began to invade the friends' lives with an intensity that was both terrifying and relentless. Their initial curiosity had morphed into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. The apparitions, once mere flashes of shadow and sound, transformed into vivid, ghastly illusions that forced the friends to confront their worst fears, dragging them deeper into a psychological abyss. Max, who had always been the bravest among them, was the first to experience a full-blown illusion. One evening, while scrolling through his phone, a chilling scene played out in front of him, a horrifying reenactment of one of the murders from the tape. In his living room, the shadows elongated and the air grew thick with an icy chill. He watched in horror as a spectral figure resembling a victim from the tape emerged, screaming in agony, its eyes hollow and pleading. Paralyzed with fear, Max felt an overwhelming compulsion to reach out, as if he was being drawn into the very scene he was witnessing. The boundaries of reality blurred, and he found himself immersed in the torment of the past, his own screams echoing through the empty room. Sarah, meanwhile, experienced the haunting in her dreams. Each night, she would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, having relived the gruesome events of the tape in agonizing detail. The illusions were so vivid that she could feel the coldness of the blade as it glided across her skin, the sharp sting of betrayal echoing through her thoughts. Each dream left her more exhausted, the terror seeping into her waking life. She began to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision during the day, their presence a constant reminder of her sleepless nights. Her once practical mind deteriorated under the weight of the horrors, leading her to question her sanity. Jake, usually the rational thinker, found himself haunted by technological anomalies. As he worked on his computer, he often saw distorted images of the ghostly figures flickering across his screen, their grotesque faces leering at him. The whispers he had dismissed as mere figments of imagination grew louder, drowning out his thoughts and filling him with dread. One fateful night, his computer malfunctioned, displaying a series of chilling images from the tape, forcing him to watch the nightmarish scenes unfold before him again. The compulsion to join the spirits became so overwhelming that he nearly succumbed, feeling their icy fingers beckoning him to their world. Emily, whose art had once been a source of inspiration, became a prisoner to her own creativity. The sketches that flowed from her hand morphed into grotesque depictions of horror, reflecting the darkness that had enveloped her mind. One evening, while working in her studio, she felt a sudden chill and turned to find herself face to face with a ghostly apparition, its expression twisted in anguish. As she attempted to flee, the figure reached out, and in that moment, she was thrust into a horrific scene from the tape, the very murders she had tried to escape. The sensation of being trapped in her own artwork drove her to the brink of madness, Each friend became ensnared in a web of terror, their psychological states deteriorating as they were forced to participate in the reenactments of the murders. The boundaries of reality and illusion faded, leaving them feeling helpless and isolated. They could no longer trust their senses, as every creak of wood, every whispered wind carried with it the weight of impending doom. They were haunted not only by the ghosts of the tape, but by the insidious grip of fear that tightened around their lives, strangling the joy they once shared. A shared sense of paranoia began to creep in, fracturing their once solid friendships. They found themselves avoiding each other, unsure of who might be the next to succumb to the horrors. Conversations grew strained, filled with unspoken fears and lingering glances towards the shadows that now felt alive. The friends were becoming mere shells of their former selves, caught in a relentless cycle of terror and despair. Each day was a battle against the darkness, and as the haunting intensified, they realized that their lives would never return to normal. They had unwittingly unleashed a force that would consume them, leaving them trapped in a nightmare of their own making. The air was thick with an oppressive silence as the friends stood outside the decrepit house, its silhouette looming ominously against the night sky. Each of them felt the weight of dread settle in their stomachs, a foreboding prelude to the confrontation that awaited them within. They had tried to escape the horrors unleashed by the fear tape, but now, drawn back by an unseen force, they were determined to confront the malevolent spirits that had invaded their lives. As they stepped through the threshold, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air inside was stale, tinged with the scent of decay and despair. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock their very existence. Max led the way, his heart pounding in his chest, while Sarah clutched a flashlight, its beam flickering as if mirroring her own trepidation. Jake followed closely, his mind racing with thoughts of how to outsmart the supernatural forces, while Emily held her sketchbook tightly, a talisman against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a cacophony of whispers erupted around them, echoing through the empty halls.
Get out, get out.
The voices were layered and distorted, merging into a haunting symphony that reverberated within their very bones. They pressed onward, each step feeling like a descent into madness. The walls seemed to close in, and the temperature plummeted, their breath visible in the frigid air. As they reached the living room, the heart of the house's malevolence, the atmosphere grew electric. Max's flashlight flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that twisted and morphed into nightmarish figures. In the center of the room, a swirling vortex of darkness began to form, its edges crackling with energy. Within it, they could see glimpses of the horrors depicted in the tape, a family in torment, shadows of their past replaying their final moments in anguished silence. The friends exchanged terrified glances, but there was no turning back now.
We need to face them.
Jake shouted over the growing din of chaos.
We can't allow them to control us any longer.
With a newfound resolve, they stepped closer to the swirling mass, bracing themselves for the confrontation. As they neared, the shadows coalesced into a grotesque figure, its features an amalgamation of the suffering souls trapped within the house. It reached out with long, bony fingers, its hollow eyes boring into their very essence.
You should never have come here.
It hissed, a cacophony of voices layered beneath.
You are ours now.
In a moment of sheer desperation, Emily raised her sketchbook, the pages fluttering wildly as she began to sketch the entity before them. With each stroke, she channeled her fear, transforming it into a weapon.
We are not afraid of you,
she cried, her voice echoing through the room. As she completed the drawing, a blinding light erupted from the pages, illuminating the darkness and forcing the entity to recoil. Max, emboldened by Emily's bravery, stepped forward, shouting,
You don't own us. We're here to set you free.
The words hung in the air as a surge of energy pulsed through the room. The shadows writhed and twisted, desperate to escape the light that now filled the space. Sarah, finding her voice amidst the chaos, joined in.
You were wronged, but we will not let your pain become our burden.
She took Jake's hand, their resolve uniting in a powerful bond. Together, they created a circle around Emily, their combined strength fueling the light that pushed back against the malevolence. As the entity shrieked, the darkness began to dissipate, revealing fleeting glimpses of the lost souls trapped within. They looked at the friends with expressions of gratitude and sorrow, their forms shimmering like smoke. The house trembled, as if the very foundation was protesting the release of its captive spirits. With one final push, Emily finished her drawing, depicting the spirits in their serene state. The light erupted once more, enveloping the room in a brilliant glow. The energy surged, tearing apart the malevolent force that had held them captive. As the darkness imploded, the anguished cries of the spirits faded into whispers of peace, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. Victory came at a cost, but they had faced the darkness together, their fears transformed into strength. As the last remnants of the entity vanished, the house sighed, a sense of calm washing over it. The friends stood in the aftermath, hearts racing and minds reeling, yet united by the bond forged in the depths of horror. They had confronted evil and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, knowing that they had the power to shape their own destinies. As the oppressive darkness receded, the friends felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. They had confronted the malevolent entity that had haunted them, but the emotional toll was immense. Standing in the now silent house, they exchanged weary glances, each grappling with the chaos that had unfolded. They had escaped the physical clutches of the spirits, yet the emotional scars ran deep. Max, still trembling from the confrontation, was the first to break the silence.
Did we really just do that?
He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, laden with uncertainty. Emily nodded, her hands still clutching her sketchbook, now marked with traces of the light that had saved them.
But at what cost?
She murmured, recalling the faces of the tormented souls they had glimpsed, lost and longing for release. As they stepped back into the cool night air, the weight of their ordeal pressed heavily upon them. Each friend felt the remnants of fear lingering in their hearts, echoing the horrors they had witnessed. Sarah, who had fought so hard against her own nightmares, looked back at the house.
I can just shake the feeling that this isn't over,
she said, a hint of dread in her voice. What if the spirits are still out there waiting? Jake, ever the logical thinker, attempted to reassure her.
We broke the cycle. They re-free now. We need to focus on healing.
But even he felt the uncertainty gnawing at him. They had survived, but the shadows of their experiences loomed large, casting doubts over their futures. In the weeks that followed, the group struggled to return to their normal lives. Their friendships, once vibrant and filled with laughter, now bore the weight of shared trauma. Each of them sought solace in their own ways, but the haunting memories refused to fade. Max threw himself into his work, but found it difficult to concentrate. Sarah sought therapy, hoping to make sense of her fears, while Jake buried himself in technology, attempting to rationalize the irrational. Emily, however, found a strange comfort in her art. The sketches she had created during the confrontation became a form of catharsis. She began to draw again, capturing the beauty and pain of their experiences. Her artwork transformed, depicting not just horrors, but also resilience and hope. Each stroke of her pencil became a testament to their struggle, a reminder that they had faced darkness and emerged on the other side. Though they had escaped the physical entrapment of the house, the emotional aftermath lingered. They were forever changed, bound by their shared experience, yet each carrying their individual burdens. The friends vowed to support each other, understanding that healing would be a gradual process. Together, they began to reclaim their lives, learning to navigate a world that once felt safe, but had since been shadowed by fear. The legacy of the fear tape would always be a part of them, a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the light they had discovered within themselves. As they moved forward, They embraced the uncertainty of the future, determined to find joy amidst the remnants of their trauma. The spirits had been set free, but the true journey of healing had only just begun. Months had passed since the friends had confronted the horrors of the fear tape, yet the shadows of their past lingered like a haunting melody. They had made strides in their healing journey, but the sense of unease never truly dissipated. Max often found himself glancing over his shoulder, convinced that the darkness would return. Meanwhile, Sarah's sleepless nights continued, filled with fragmented dreams of chilling whispers and cold fingers reaching out for her. One evening, as the autumn leaves danced in the wind, Emily sat in her studio, sketching furiously. The once vibrant colors had faded to darker hues, reflecting the anxiety that had settled in her heart. Just as she turned to capture a new concept, a sudden chill swept through the room and her breath hitched. The door creaked open, revealing a group of young friends curious and eager to explore the remnants of the past.
Hey, have you guys heard about the fear tape?
One of them asked, excitement bubbling in their voices. A wave of dread washed over Emily, her heart racing as she realized the cycle was beginning anew. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers that echoed the past. She felt the weight of the house pressing down on her, as if it were waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. In that moment, Emily knew that the horror was far from over. It had merely found new vessels to haunt, a legacy that would continue to unfold.